Hi, this is Dan Limmer from Limmer Creative, here with my 5 things. This time we're talking about volunteer recruitment and retention. It certainly is a hot topic, and recently I saw a news article from upstate New York, Elizabethtown, in the Press Republican. State EMS Director Lee Burns went up to Essex County to talk about criticism that the state directive to increase EMT training hours from 120 to 140 or 170 hours affected the ability to recruit and retain volunteers. This is a huge issue everywhere you go, and I'm going to use that as the fodder for these things. I was born and raised in a volunteer system in upstate New York. I have lifetime friends that were there and had some amazing times. I grew up there as a paramedic. I recognize the issues that a lot of agencies have. I live in Maine now, and we see it here. I will start this by saying that I am in favor of the education standards. Sometimes more training is necessary. I think Lee Burns is a very sharp person. She went up there and had to make an unpopular stand. The 5 things we're going to talk about today include training. As a matter of fact, we'll start with that. Number 1 is make training work for you. Here's the dilemma. You can't really argue and say, we don't need trained people on an ambulance. And the state has made guidelines. We have to do those guidelines. That's the way it is. The reason that this first thing is make training work for you is all too often we have a very negative attitude about training. It's very difficult, onerous sometimes. I totally agree. However, if we believe it's going to suck, and if we believe it's going to be bad, and if we believe it's going to make everything go away and crumble around us, the training will be poor quality. Nobody's going to come. If we don't buy into it, no one else is going to buy into it. We really don't have a choice. The education standards were designed to give EMTs more knowledge and the ability to think and apply and take care of people. In addition to the weapons of mass destruction and the hazmat training that Lee Burns noted in her article, we also have more skills than we've ever had before and more thinking than we've ever had before in EMS. Now epinephrine auto-injectors, pulse oximetry, intranasal Narcan, spinal changes are on the horizon. There's more thinking and more stuff. Nebulizers being used by EMTs. That requires thinking. We need the training. Make the training work for you. I was in an organization here in Maine. They had annual training one Saturday every October. And if you couldn't make that one Saturday, they'd say, sorry, you can't volunteer anymore. And you know what? That really isn't a very big thing to hold over anybody because, if they don't volunteer, they will go to the soccer game or they will go to the family thing they'd missed that day. Or maybe they just relax and work in the yard and do something they need to do. It didn't work. That threat of not being able to volunteer in the 70s and the 80s when people left work and the fire station was as big a community as the community itself, well, that was something. But society has changed now. We have to respond. I went to that organization and I said, you can't just have one. You're making threats that people aren't going to be able to volunteer or work anymore when you know you need them and you're going to make an exception. Why don't you try a different plan? So the new plan was they did a Sunday and a Saturday in the same 7-day period, which meant that if somebody was on vacation that week and it was always around Columbus Day, then the person still wouldn't be able to make it. Instead of doing 2 weeknights and then a weekend day or some other thing, they did it by an old model. They didn't think. We have to make the training work. Now, we're going to talk about other things in here about hoops and red tape, and this all is intermingled together. I mean, it really is. Use other methods. Now, sometimes there's video training, there's distance education, there's self-paced training. It's not the answer to everything, but sometimes we have to look at other options to do this. Even for the basic EMT class, there's high-quality distance education that can be done in a person's own time. In my heart, I believe people still want to help their community. We have to make it easy to do so. We have to make it so training isn't looked at as a burden. It's a challenge. But if we make it a burden, the new people will think it's a burden. They're going to follow that lead. All right, number 2, start a mentoring program. Andy Stern, a good friend of mine, also from New York, did a presentation at a national EMS conference one time called Tigers Eat Their Young, Why Do We? And it's about mentoring. And many times we bring people into an organization. See, we can recruit people relatively well. Retaining them is the issue. I think the issue in retaining people is that people don't come in and feel like they fit. They don't feel like they're at home. They don't feel like they're part of a team. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes we've got the current hotshot that doesn't want the new hotshot coming in and knocking them off their roost in the organization. People don't have time to play those games anymore. We need to bring people in and make them feel at home. Everything from showing them where to sit and where the bathroom is and how the organization works, to more detailed things like having a mentor available after a tough call, or even after a string of routine calls where the person doesn't feel like anything is really going on. That the way to recruit people is most commonly one-on-one. You can have drives and websites, but if somebody says to another person, wow, this is a great organization, I go in there and it feels good and I help the community, they will bring someone in. And when you bring them in, you will keep them if they feel like they are doing a job well. The people we're bringing in are adults. We can't play games. We have to be able to look at this person and tell them when they're doing well or when they're not, give them feedback, and treat them like an adult. And one of the ways to do that is to have a mentoring program. I spoke at an EMS conference once, and a lieutenant from Fidney, from the fire department, New York City, came up to me and says, we need a mentoring program. I said, mentoring is great. I said, it's really going to help you out. She goes, is there a policy we can do for that? And, well, you get a big organization. I suppose you have to have a policy. But you know what I thought the answer really was? Find a couple people and put them in a mentoring role and make it cool. And then everyone will want to do it. Now, not everyone will be the best mentor. I get that. But the way to do it is within your organization. If you're a leader, make it cool to help someone else. And you know what? When you don't get a lot of serious calls and you're at a lull in your paid or your volunteer EMS career, the ability to help and teach someone is rejuvenating for experienced people in your organization. It's a wonderful thing. Start a mentoring program. Eliminate the red tape. Number 3. Using the same 2 things we talked about with training and mentoring, we create hoops that people have to jump through. Sometimes they're because, well, that's what we've always done. Well, that may have to change. Well, obviously we have to have standards, and training is a part of that standards concept. We have to have people that are trained and qualified, and we have to have people that can safely drive the ambulance. There are certain things that we can't bargain on. However, there are some things that we do. Look at your organization and say, what do we need and what do we don't? What is keeping people away and what is necessary for our organization to function? And it's my belief that you'll find things that you could probably cut back on, still maintain a quality organization, and it will help you recruit and retain volunteers. The concept of bandwidth is one that's very, very challenging for volunteer organizations. And here it is, that do you want to have a group of 6 very well-trained people that are going to work all the time or volunteer all the time? Or do you want to have 25 people that are going to respond on a regular basis? Here's the problem. There's people, when you have 6, somebody burns out, gets a job, gets angry at somebody else in the organization and stops, you feel it. Even departments that are hybrid, when you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people in the station, and then you require volunteers to come in and backfill when there's a lot of calls. We need that bandwidth. We need enough people. Many times we settle for having a few people that are trained in everything. Sometimes you have to spread that out. I think the red tape and the politics. The politics are what drives people out. We've seen it time and time again in organizations. Focus on retention. And I think the previous 3 have built up to number 4 here, focusing on retention by eliminating the red tape, by not making the training a burden, by mentoring. How many times do people have a bad call and don't know how they did, and we don't tell them? How many times has someone been on a call and feels like they didn't know what to do and didn't have a safety net? That's a role of mentoring, of leadership. that we bring people into the organization. We say, well, we can't keep them. But we don't look at someone's basic needs. And those basic needs are vitally important. That if to retain people, we need to think about their needs. We've made an investment, an EMT class, and uniforms, and more training, and bring them in and spending time. Retaining them is a combination of all the things we just talked about. Dumping the politics, having a mentor, making the training reasonable. Recruitment is easy. I think retention is the bigger challenge, and sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot in that regard. And finally, make it personal. I think this takes everything we've talked about before and wraps it up. When is someone going to stay? They're going to stay when it feels good. We've talked about that. I would choose, when I was a volunteer in New York, to go to the fire station because there were such a good group of people. You could go in, get a cup of coffee, and you could always find someone to talk to. If you had a moment, you just stopped through. And there were times when there were calls that I didn't want to go, and it was not so much that I wanted to help the people of my community, which I did. I didn't want my friend to be on that call by themselves or by him or herself when I knew that I could help. What is that? It's a connection. It's personal. That if we take, it's a major draw. We take these organizations that we have, and we had deeply personal, fun organizations. And now we've got organizations that have got red tape, and the training is looked at as a burden, and quite frankly, it's not good to go there. That the volunteering is professionally done, but it's not a job. We have to motivate people to be there. And how do we do it? We give people roots in the organization. They make friends. They're appreciated. That there's status in the community. That the way we bring people in the door and the way we keep them is we make them feel needed. We make them feel like they fit. Make them feel like they're doing an important thing. And we make friends with them. We're not going to be great friends with everyone. We know there's all kinds of people in EMS. But making it personal makes a difference. So, we talked about making training that works for you, to start a mentoring program, to eliminate red tape, to focus on retention, and to make it personal. Those are the 5 things I wanted to tell you about volunteer recruitment and retention. This is Dan Limmer, and I hope they help. Thank you.